All right, class, this is our virtual literature lesson on the short story, The Ransom of Red Chief. This is a story of a kidnapping and a ransom note. And making it sound like, it's really serious, right? And then the kidnapped kid, he's terrified because he misses his parents. And that's not really what happened at all, is it? Those of you who have read know that I'm really setting this up in a not really the way that this story went. And there's a little bit of a surprise, actually, because the story does not go as you typically see these ransom note kidnap stories go. And O. Henry, our author, sets the tone for this. This is a humorous, lighthearted story. And O. Henry is known for this. We'll call him Mr. Short Story O. Henry. He is our author. He wrote this short story in 1907. And why do I call him Mr. Short Story? Well, it all goes back to his biography here. There you see a picture of O. Henry. He is basically a 19th century author. Did many of his work in the beginning of the 20th century, but you see that his lifespan mostly happened in the late 19th century. But his real name was William Sidney Porter. He's from Greensboro, North Carolina, and moved to Texas, later settled in New York. He's known for his humor, his humorous stories. So many short stories that he wrote that 9 collections were published during his life and 8 more after he had died. So he passed away in 1910. By 1918, they were handing out the O. Henry Memorial Award. This award would go each year to the authors of the best short stories. So that's why we call him Mr. Short Story. You may have heard of The Gift of the Magi. That was another one of his stories. And a famous story that's been made into movies and TV shows and things like that. All right, Mr. Short Story. So let's get into our story here. So Sam and Bill are our main characters. Sam is the narrator, actually, and Bill is his accomplice. They're both criminals. They're trying to pull off this high-priced scheme, and they need money in which to do this. And so they decide to go to Summit, Alabama, down south, where there's a wealthy person by the name of Ebenezer Dorset. And their plan is they're going to kidnap his kid, Johnny. Right? And you should have read this already, by the way, before you listen to this. They kidnap his kid, Johnny, and then expect to ask $1,500 for ransom. Well, after the apprehending of the boy, one of them gets hit in the face, and so he's like, we're gonna tack another 500 onto that. So now the ransom is $2,000, they write this note to Ebenezer, and what would you expect to happen? You would expect, maybe the police get involved, and the kid is crying, right? And he wants to go home. I miss my bed, and none of that happens at all. So whatever you think is going to happen here does not. Johnny, who wants to be called Red Chief, okay, because apparently he's into Indians, and probably too much so, because there is one incident where he was attempting to scalp Bill, one of the criminals, one of the kidnappers. All right, and Sam is telling the story, all of this to us. We also see copies of ransom notes going back and forth. The ransom note from the kidnappers saying, hey, give us $2,000 and we'll return your son to you. The response that the kidnappers get from the father is that, how about this? I figured you're probably pretty sick of him by now. How about you give him back to me and you give me $250 to take him back? And they gladly accept because Bill especially, he had Red Chief made him eat sand like a horse, and he made him act like a horse, and Bill was just absolutely terrified. There's one part where Sam was going to leave, and Bill's like, "You're not going to leave me alone with him, are you?" This boy. So he terrorized Bill, basically. And so they were more than happy to give him back to his father. There were, and the funny thing about it is there's no police involved. They didn't take the kidnappers to jail. And actually, Johnny, the Red Chief, attached himself to Bill's leg, and his father had to pry him off while they were paying him the $250 to take his kid back. All right, so not a serious story, not a lighthearted story. Now, the subject matter, might have you think that this is a serious story, but it's really not. It's lighthearted. It's humor, which O. Henry was known for. Okay, so that's a little bit of a summary of the story there, which you already read. Tone. Let's talk about tone. So an author's expressed attitude toward the subject in literary work. Tone is conveyed through the author's particular choice of words and details in describing setting, portraying characters, and presenting events. In the beginning of this lesson, I used a tone, right, that was completely different than what the story had. The tone that I used portrayed like more of a serious story, kidnappers and ransom notes, and that's really what it wasn't at all. The tone was completely different. It's lighthearted, meant to be funny because with bungling kidnappers, because things didn't turn out the way you would expect them to. All right, so lighthearted, funny, humorous. That's the tone of this story that could, based on the subject, could have been something else. All right, let's go to page 372. Let's go through our questions. Who's Red Chief? That's Johnny Dorset. It's the name he uses when he wants to play Indians with his kidnappers. During their first night in the cave, number 2, why do Bill and Sam decide to kidnap his son? They want $1,500. Eventually it goes to $2,000. They want the money so that they can fund this other scheme they got going on in, I think, Western Illinois, it said. And they know that the father has money, so they're trying to extort him out of that. Let's see. Number 3, during the first night in the cave, what does Johnny almost do to Bill? Almost scalps him, and he's shrieking, right? He's screaming, as if like somebody had seen a spider or whatever. Number 4, what do the kidnappers finally do with Red Chief? They gladly pay the ransom to the father to take him off their hands. All right, so number 5, is there any indication in the first few pages of the story that the kidnapping may not succeed? The first sentence, there's a sentence that read, "It looked like a good thing, but wait till I tell you." This is Sam, the narrator, saying this. Okay, so we know that, I guess it didn't all go way you would expect, and that is definitely the case. Number 6, how would you characterize Bill and Sam? They're not the most skillful criminals. Sam especially likes to use big words, but not in the right way. And so he ends up sounding more foolish because it's almost like he's trying too hard to sound smart. They kind of have a condescending attitude towards the small town and its citizens, but they have some education, but pretty much in this humorous, lighthearted story, they're portrayed as bungling oafs of kidnappers. And the kid pretty much, Red Chief pretty much dominates, right, and is calling the shots. Let's see. Number 7, near the middle of the story, who is in control? We mentioned that's Red Chief mainly in control. That's pretty unusual because the kidnappers are supposed to be in charge of a kidnapping, not the kidnappee. Then number 8, what is unusual about Ebenezer Dorset's letter to the kidnappers? It offers to take him off their hands for $250, and that's the unexpected outcome, the fact that they actually take him up on it because they're so willing to get rid of him. Okay, let's see. Let's go to this is what you need to know. There's going to be some vocabulary that you need to look up, but here's pretty much what you need to know for your assignment. So just know that the tone is lighthearted of this short story, and the Bill and Sam, they're taking this kidnapping seriously, right? But eventually the story itself ends up being not so serious because of what happens. The story takes place in the South, so Summit, Alabama is where he was kidnapped from. Bill and Sam, why do they need the ransom money? They're looking to commit another crime for even more money. Okay, so they need this $2,000, $1,500, $2,000 is more of a seed money to fund that bigger scheme. Bill and Sam could be characterized as I guess if anything, unskilled criminals. Johnny proves to be a kind of a mischievous boy, right? So much that his father knows that they'll be willing to pay the $250 to him to get rid of him. Ebenezer Dorset is Johnny's father, know that. When Johnny's returned, his father has to peel him off of Bill's leg. He doesn't want to go back home. The unexpected outcome of the story, like we mentioned, the kidnappers end up paying the ransom to get rid of Johnny, Red Chief. All right, Johnny lives in the town of Summit. Know that. Is Johnny terrified the whole time he's gone? No, he's having the time of his life terrorizing these kidnappers. Red Chief terrorizes Bill. He's afraid. He's actually afraid of Red Chief. Bill is. Johnny does try to scalp Bill. And originally Bill and Sam were going to ask for $1,500 as Johnny's ransom. Then they upped it to $500. Bill and Sam are not very skilled as criminals. And Bill and Sam they make a point of not telling Johnny, hey, you're going home. We'll take you home, because they knew that Johnny would throw a fit probably, and they wouldn't be able to get him, so they had to trick him into returning home. Now come on, what kidnapping takes place where the person kidnapped has to be tricked in order to go home? This one. Let's see, Ebenezer Dorset suggests that they pay him to get Johnny back. We know that happened. Was the outcome of the story predictable? I don't think you probably could have predicted that not only would they not get the ransom, but they would be paying the father to take him back. So probably not very predictable. And that's what makes the story, somewhat humorous because of that. And there are examples of exaggeration in the story. So there is hyperbole throughout, and there's going to be vocabulary on your assignment as well. I think that's pretty much it. So we've got a little bit of time. Let's talk about something called malapropism. There's a couple instances where the narrator, Sam, is using big words to try to sound smart, but he's not using them in the correct way. Okay, so for example, he uses apparition as opposed to aberration. Okay, he's trying to sound smart by using big words, but first of all, he's not using the right ones. Second of all, he's not using it's not the correct meaning of what he's trying to say. So he ends up, by trying to sound smart, he ends up sounding not so smart. Okay, I think that's about it. So that's all you need to know. Make sure, hopefully you've learned a little bit more information about the story here. And you should be ready to do your worksheet. You should have everything you need to know. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. I know I did.